Welcome to my studio. This is a loft called the Reynolds Lofts in Louisville, Kentucky. It's about a 1,200 square foot room. It's 25 by 25 with approximately 12-foot ceilings. This might be a pretty big space for a lot of you, but for me, it was a huge upgrade from my small living room that I started in. And in my living room, I built sets very similar to what's behind me. It's just basically creating a space and a unique area to shoot in, and you can do this even in your home. But here we are in this studio, and we have the advantages of tall ceilings to really build this set and build a lighting scenario around this. Now I just want to be clear that this might look like a big space. You can take this same set and apply it in a small space such as a living room with 8-foot ceilings. You don't need 12-foot ceilings or a big 25 by 25 room to do this. Throughout this lesson and upcoming lessons, you're going to learn how to take regular materials that you can purchase at Home Depot, Lowe's, or your local hardware store and take it into a small space that you have available and really build a cool set. Now I want to take you through all these materials that it took to build this set behind me, because this is going to be a very important foundation for all the future lessons I'm going to show you regarding production and design. With my work, I like to see structure, I like to see lines, I like to see natural feeling spaces. And with this particular set behind me, we wanted to create a room. So when someone looks at it, they're looking at the image as if it was a space and not a studio. Because a lot of photographers like to use that seamless background with the curve, and that's not something that looks like a room to me or doesn't look natural. I want a space with strong lines, 90-degree angles, and so that's what we've created behind me. And it all starts with white paper. If you plan on shooting 3/4 or a headshot, then you could set up a simple white background and get away with it. Instead of hanging a background, a floating seamless background, we've decided to tack the white paper onto the wall because it gives me the ability to direct the model to lean on the wall. It's just going to make an overall more engaging shot. For this particular shoot, I want a lot of space for the model to move around, and so we need a lot of paper in order to do something such as this. We're using white paper from Savage Universal. It's their standard 9-foot rolls. Because we need so much paper, the 9-foot rolls just provide a lot more material to work with. Now that we have our background in place, we just have to cover the floor with that same seamless paper. My assistants have rolled it out and taped the same seamless paper to the floor. The problem with this is that now we have this line where the edge of the wall meets the floor. The way to solve this problem is to seal the edge with white gaffer's tape. Now that we have our background and our floor made, what we need to do is build our walls. And these walls are made with V-flats. V-flats are 2 pieces of gator foam that are taped together with gaffer's tape that allow them to stand on their own. One side is white, one side is black. That gives me the ability to both bounce light and cut light. Throughout this tutorial, you'll be seeing these V-flats in use in the studio. A lot of times they're used for modifying light, for bouncing light, for cutting light, for flagging light. They're very versatile. But in this case, we're going to be using them as walls. These particular V-flats are made from 4x8 gator foam, and they're reversible, so one side is white and the other side is black. And they were pretty tough to find. Luckily, I'm in a big city, and I was able to find this material at a plastics manufacturer here locally. If you don't have access to materials such as gator foam, don't worry, there are plenty of options in your town that you can find to create a V-flat. So I'm going to have Hunter, my assistant, bring in a simple solution and a simple material that you can purchase at any hardware store. So this is a 4x8 1-inch insulation board that every hardware store sells in any market. It's Polypro, it's foam. As you'll see, one side you're going to have to paint or peel off, but the other side is white, which gives you the ability to instantly use this in the studio. The one thing I really dislike about this material is that it's flimsy, it'll break pretty easily compared to my gator foam V-flats that I have. But if you're on a budget or in a pinch, this will definitely work in the studio. If you want to create a V-flat at home, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is take 2 of these boards, stick them together, and create a gaffer's tape hinge that allows you to make a V and have these boards stand up on their own. Now that you know what a V-flat is and how it works, what we've done behind me is my assistants have now covered these V-flats that I've had in the studio with that same white paper that we used on both the floor and the background. Now that we have our walls set in place and the background and floor taped, I want you to remember that this doesn't have to be perfect, because in post-processing, what we're going to do is clean up all these lines, remove all this gaffer's tape, and make this final image absolutely flawless. What I firmly believe sets my work apart are the details, and none of that really comes together without a team. Although I might have a vision, I'm not the expert in many of the facets that are required to create one of my photographs. Right now I'm joined with some of my favorite people. This is Gunnar Dethridge, who is our stylist for wardrobe on today's shoot, and Bethany Hood, who is our hair and makeup artist for today. With every photograph, it's important to collaborate, discuss our mood and concept before the shoot, and so I want to talk to these guys a little bit about what we're doing today. I know that I want to start simple with lighting, and so I'm going to be using one single strobe. It's going to be very bright, it's going to be very hard, and we're going to use that against our set that we've built. I think that it's important that an overall mood and a concept is built before we even step onto that set. So Gunnar, what have we done today to really accentuate and bring out that look?
Well, I think taking into consideration that you're keeping it simple and you're keeping it really contrasty with the hard light, it's important to play off of that with the clothing as well. What I have styled for Alex today is a solid head-to-toe white outfit. I've chosen something that has a black outline on it, a black button, something to give you your eye a way to focus. It gives you a chance to really see the beauty of the outfit, and also a really blank canvas for you guys with your shot and your lighting.
That sounds great. So Bethany, what do you think that we need to do with hair and makeup to make sure that this concept really comes together?
So I think with a look like this, the hair and makeup can go one of two ways, either all in or to stay pretty simple just like everything else. But today we've chosen to do a little bit more of a natural color with brown on our eyes. It's going to bring out the blue, but it's going to give it just enough to where it's not shouting. Like, look at everything in the photograph, but let's focus on her eyes. So we're going to keep it a little bit more or less involved with a neutral color. Keep her lip color a little bit more neutral, but enough to give it shape. So instead of going super bold with her hair or her makeup, it's going to be extremely classic. So probably slicked back out of her face, and just a bit of a smoke around her eyes, so it's intriguing, but she's not lost in the photo. When you're considering editorial, either the makeup can be extremely avant-garde, like a heavy liner look, or a darker shadow, lashes, things like that, or it could be a little bit more natural, where it's just all we focus on is her foundation and her contour and a little bit of a glow. So maybe on some other shoots we would get a little bit more of a darker lip or a heavier contour, or stronger focus on her features, but on this one we're really focusing on the brightness of the shot, making sure that every single element, from the white in her clothes to the white in the background to just the simplicity of her face structure, that's what we're focusing on. We're just trying to get a clean shot. So that's the direction that I took the makeup.
In the past, I used to bring on wardrobe stylist, hair and makeup, and a full team, and then they just left, which sort of left a gap in creating the final photograph. Because a lot of times when I'm shooting, there's touch-ups that need to be made, there's wardrobe changes that have to be made, and there's a lot of things that can be done while I'm shooting that I really need that team in place. Now it's more important than ever to bring this collaborative aspect into my photographs, and so I have these guys stay with me at all times throughout the entire session. Gunnar, talk a little bit about that and the collaboration that you and I have on the set.
So typically I come in not just as a wardrobe stylist, but as a creative director. And what that really means is, like, you and I talk about a direction and a vision. You tell me what you need out of the photograph, and my job is to be the liaison between you and the talent. I need to make that middle segue as smooth and easy as I can. So whether it be you setting up your frame and then I put the talent in the photo and I work with them on posing and making it natural, and we communicate back and forth to really talk about, you know, what looks good, what we like, what we don't like, and it's a collaborative effort to get the end product that we need from that.
And I think that's something to remember, is that you and I are constantly bouncing back and forth ideas.
Totally. And
so when we're posing, and when I'm posing, I make sure that I have a second pair of eyes on that tethering screen in the laptop, And I get really almost the final approval, especially if it's a client that we're both working for, as far as what you do. So the clothing and the wardrobe and the overall mood. And then I look at it and I'm like, this is it. Like,
we see separate things completely. You're looking at the pose and the natural movement of the body, and I'm looking completely at the clothing, the hair, the makeup, and then that's where you come onto set. Like touch-ups are such a necessary thing.
Being a makeup artist, being very detail-oriented, I think that hair and makeup is probably the last thing that the photographer is looking for, but that's where staying on set the entire time is my job, getting it right straight out of camera, making sure that the lip is good, everything is good.
And it needs constant attention.
Yeah. So of course you're gonna have to do some post-processing, but you know, my job on set from start to finish is to make sure that that shot's right in camera. So minimal editing is the idea.
Now that I've introduced my team and the people that I collaborate with, we're gonna head into the studio and start working with this set in this high-key style of lighting. We've now moved into the studio. We've talked about the styling, we've talked about hair and makeup and the concept and the overall mood. So now it's time to talk a little bit about the lighting and the overall sort of high-key scenario that we're about ready to dive into. In my hand now I have a Profoto D1. It's 500 watt mono light. And we're gonna start really simple today with just a bare bulb light on a C-stand. What I have right here is a Profoto zoom reflector. And the purpose of this 7-inch reflector is to really hone that light in and give it a little bit more directional specular flare. And to be perfectly honest, I don't even own a zoom reflector. And in this case especially, we don't need one because I'm not even concerned about spill in this case. So in this light scenario, we're really gonna try to mimic sunlight. And direction of light is everything here. So we're gonna place our beautiful model, Alex, on the back wall, on this background, and shift our light around to see where our shadows are falling. Now that we've placed Alex on the wall, I'm gonna turn on this modeling light. And one thing to remember with this style of lighting is that the modeling light really, truly resembles what the final output is gonna be. And as I turn this light, you're gonna see the shadows sort of change. And they're gonna adapt as I bring this light back and I'm gonna shift it from left to right. And that's one thing to really truly notice with this style of lighting. Another important thing to remember with this lighting is we're attempting to mimic sunlight. So I need to make sure that this light is high and it's pretty far back. We're approximately 15 feet from this wall right now. And I'm gonna shift this left and right and I'm gonna go sort of direct just to see what that looks like. I've now shifted this light to be directly in front of her. It's eye level and it's very directional. And as you can see, there is a little shadow on the background, but because it is so direct, it's sort of wrapping around her head. Let's take a shot to see what this looks like. As you can see with this particular shot, with this really direct look, it really resembles a sort of a straight-on speedlight look. And this isn't really something I'm going for because I want some more drama, I want more shadows. So to create more shadows, what we need to do is emulate the sun. And to emulate the sun, we're gonna tilt this head down and we're gonna raise our C-stand up by about 8 feet. As I raise this C-stand up, you're gonna see the shadow under her chin start to appear. And that's really what I want to see because it's gonna start edging out her chin. It's gonna really bring out her bone structure. Let's take a shot in this position and see what it looks like. If you were to compare both shots at this point, you're gonna see that one has a little bit more drama. One has a little bit more mood to it, has a little bit more strength, and that's the one with those strong shadows under the jawline. So I'm not quite in love with the shot yet. I need more shadow. Because we have a very white background, very white clothing, everything is white, I want to cast a little bit more shadows. I want to get those shadows a little bit more long. And in order to do that, what we need to do is shift this strobe to the right so that we cast a longer shadow on the left side of the frame. As I shift this light to the right, you're going to see that the shadows on her right side and the left of the frame become much longer and much more dense. Let's take a shot here and we'll see what it looks like. Now that we've shifted this light to the right and we have more shadows on the left side of the frame, there's a lot more contrast, there's a lot more separation from the background to the subject. And so what I would do now is start positioning her in a sort of a composition that's going to work with this style of lighting. If I wanted to really accentuate these shadows even further, then I could simply have her come off the wall and step forward. So come off the wall, boom. And so as you see now, these shadows have really separated from her body. They've really cast a longer shadow on the wall. If you wanted to create more definition for the subject to the background, this is definitely one way to do it. It's important to remember in a lot of fashion images that you'll see this same similar style of lighting. You should be able to really dissect this style of imagery by looking at the shadows on the wall and definitely the shadows under the chin and the shadows on the face. For this particular image, we're going to have Alex step back on the wall, and we've designed this set so it's very versatile. I can have her leaning against the wall, I can have her sitting down using a prop, I can have different elements because we've built this room, we've built this set. It's not just a floating, seamless background. And now that we have this lighting, we have this set built, it's really time to start posing and bringing in Gunnar and bringing in Bethany and start collaborating to really get a final image. Now that we have Gunnar here on set for any wardrobe changes or anything that needs to take place in that world, I'm going to get Alex moving a little bit. Fortunately, this light scenario allows Alex to move around and have a lot of motion in the photograph because there is so much light on the background. There is so much spill everywhere. So we can get her moving and get a lot of motion in the shot. All right, so what I'm gonna have you do is turn a little bit towards me and let's just hop back and forth. So we're gonna hop from one side to the other. Okay, so it's like just dun, dun, dun. Yeah, back and forth, all right? Go ahead, Alex. One, and hop, and hop. There we go. All right, so I like this, but what I wanna do is get lower and get an angle to where it's going to increase the height of the model, increase the height of Alex as she's jumping. In order to do that, I got to get on the ground. All right, go ahead. And boom. Go ahead. Sweet. So as you can see in this shot, now that I dropped really low, her height has been really accentuated, but it's still not quite there. So Gunnar, what do you think?
What if we moved her into the corner a little bit and played on where this corner of the set is happening? I also think it could give us a chance to elongate her even more.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to take what Gunnar said. We're going to move her a little bit more into the corner, but I'm going to change the angle of my composition so that we capture a lot more of the corner. We're going to still have her hop back and forth and maintain this motion in the photograph. We're just going to change this composition so that I shoot a lot more of this corner. All right, so what I want you to do is walk like forward. So turn this way, not towards me, but towards the wall, back wall. There you go, and go that way. There you go. And jump straight forward. Yeah, go ahead. Good. Good. Yeah, I like you looking back over there, that's real nice.
Be cautious of the hands too. Mm-hmm. Be cautious of your hands as well, so that it looks like you're in that motion. It's like it feels natural at that point.
Go ahead. Perfect. One more time. Let's get it a little bit before that. Go ahead. So I like the direction of where we're going right now, but as you can see, we're going to start revealing some of this studio space in the background. But we don't have to worry about that because in post-processing, it's very easy to simply copy some of this background and move it over and paste that white in there and complete this background. You're going to start seeing that shadows are just going to start being everywhere. To me, it doesn't really matter because we've locked in this sort of sunlight style of lighting. Again, it allows the model to really move around and we can add a lot of motion to the photograph. I'm not bothered by it, but what do you think, Gunnar?
As a stylist coming in, like it's not necessarily something I would look at just the same way you wouldn't necessarily look at specific things on the outfit. But I like this. I think it looks natural. Even though it is a hard light, it does feel like a hard, natural light, and I enjoy that.
Yeah, and as photographers, I think we look at shadows and we look at lighting in a specific way, and your normal clientele isn't even going to pay attention to that.
They're not even going to look at that, actually.
Right. So I like where this is going, but I don't think that this set really calls for a lot of motion. It just isn't feeling right to me. So I think we're gonna get Alex leaning on the wall rather than actually moving. So why don't you just lean against that back wall there, but really like lean into it, like cruise back. There you go.
Think long and lean. You're so tall and this outfit's like so elongating. Really play off of that.
Yeah. And this is just gonna bring out the length of her body, especially if I shoot this from low to high.
If you bring one leg back.
So we're gonna see what this looks like.
I'm gonna go in and adjust this bow while you're down here.
Okay. So the thing to remember with fashion photography is that it's all about the clothes. We're not shooting glamour. It's not about the model's body. It's about the clothes and how they fall and how they move and how they really look in a scene. So the biggest juxtaposition here is that we have these really strong lines of the set that we've built, but we have really soft and angular lines of the model's body. And so we're gonna really play with that and try to create even more lines with Alex here. So yeah, bring that foot back a lot more. Like, yeah, but you can, there you go, that's nice. Why don't you have these, your hands flat against the wall? Yeah, not like, but like relaxed sort of. All right, just drop them.
They look nice when the wrist is angled in like that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. So the one thing to remember is that now her chin is shoved into her chest pretty much. I really wanted to bring out her jawline because this lighting really plays into that. So I need to raise her chin up to really accentuate that jawline. Good, awesome. So another thing to remember is once we have this pose locked in, I need to work on the face at this point. I really need to get the model in a nice expression. If you're working with everyday people, you're gonna have to get them laughing or just comfortable. But with working with models, you have to really lock in something that's either heavy, hard, or something that's just very soft. In this case, we're going edgy, we're going editorial. So I want to get Alex really have an expression that's hard and really strong and almost angry. And that's what we're going for with this particular shot. So get angry. So the first thing that we need to do with expression and posing is I want her to really pinch those brows. So we need to like get her almost, yeah, there you go, very strong, but a little bit less. So it's all about the subtleties. So the littlest thing can change the fabric of the entire frame. And so when you're going for this strong, hard look, that's the first thing is you want to pinch these brows. You want to have the model pinch her brows a little bit. Yeah, there you go. Keep that chin up, Alex. There you go. Perfect. Every model has their own personality, but when they're on my set and they're in front of my lens, I think it's important that they play a character. I lead them in a direction of a certain character, and in this case, we're leading Alex into a direction of masculinity, very strong strength, and almost angry. While this is an awesome shot, I think that we need to bring in something to really extend her legs out to make this even more masculine. Gunnar has now put in a stool that I'm gonna have Alex sit on, and we're gonna bring out this masculinity even more within this pose. And because I'm very OCD and I like structure, I want the lines of the stool to line up with the exact edge of the background. Now that we have Alex in this masculine pose, I'm gonna shoot around a little bit and play around with this space. Perfect, chin up a little bit, good. Chin up and around and look off camera, there you go. And so the worst thing you can be in this scenario is completely silent. So I wanna direct, I want to position, I want to pose, and along with Gunnar, we're gonna make this the best shot it can be.
On that note, can I pin her hair back for you?
Yes, please do.
Okay. I'm just gonna pin a few of these strays back for you so that you don't have to deal with that in post.
So what Gunnar is doing here is he's clipping the hair back on Alex's neck because that's gonna reduce the amount of work that I have to do and my retoucher Jordan Hartley has to do in post-processing. One thing to keep in mind is that we still are using one single light, one single strobe, and this allows us to pose and work with the model in various positions without moving the light at all. You might be asking yourself, if you're using one light, using one single strobe, why aren't these shadows darker? And it's because we're using a wall of white. We're using white paper on the background, white paper on the floor, and white walls. And what that's doing is acting like a giant reflector, bouncing this light everywhere and reducing that shadow density. If you wanted to do this with a different color or a different style of background, you might have to introduce a fill light to really fill out those shadows and reduce that shadow density. Keep in mind, I haven't moved this light at all once. Later in this tutorial, I'm going to dive into that precise style of lighting where you just can't move the model too much. But this style of lighting provides that ability to pose and move and add a lot of motion to the shot that you just can't do with other light setups. Perfect. Chin up a little bit. Great. I really like where this shot is heading. I think that we're pretty much there. But the one thing I want to do is, instead of having Alex leaning forward, which I feel is predictable, it's easy, we're going to have her lean completely back in the wall, which is going to add a lot of angularity to her body and a lot of strength and masculinity. I've got Alex in this lean now. It's looking really strong. I think that she needs to do something with her hands. So just have a hand over your body. There you go, the hand up. Because obviously she is a female model, I think this adds a little bit of softness, and it's going to juxtapose between the hardness of her face, the hardness of the pose, and then their hands being very soft. I like the shape of their body, but I still have a little issue with our composition. So I'm going to switch my camera to a more horizontal format. And a lot of times in the editorial space, we don't get that option. I have to shoot vertical because of page and page count. But in this case, I have the ability to be creative, and so I'm going to change my format to horizontal. What I'm going to do is use these lines and this structure really guide the eye to her face and her body. And also, the angle of her legs really play a crucial role in this as well, because that also acts like an angular leading line to her face. So I'm hanging out on the ground right now, and the reason why I'm so low is because, again, I want to add to the height, I want to add to power and add strength to this shot. So I'm getting super low to the ground, and I'm going to sort of shoot up her leg onto her face, and that's going to really lead the eye as well as these other angles and structured lines in the background. Okay, so this particular shot, this is where we need to be. I love this, but the one thing that I'm not liking is that I don't like that the posture of her legs are the same, so I'm going to bring that right leg back so it adds a little bit of variety to the shot. One thing to keep in mind is that her chin is now shoved into her chest, so we have to raise her chin up. Perfect. Really pinch those brows. Just be pissed. There you go. I know you feel ridiculous, but you look really good. So we're going to take a look at what we've shot so far, and we've got a lot of great shots. I think that there's a lot of different options, a lot of different expressions, a lot of different compositions. And I think it's important to remember that you're going to see a lot of this studio space where the white V-flat ends. And in post-processing, what we're going to do is literally just copy this section of wall and paste it over here. And it's a very easy blend. It's a very easy composite there.
From a styling and creative standpoint, I think that the foot is beautiful in this. The line is great. We're also kind of mimicking the lines on the chair with the legs. The shadow is really catching the back of that beautifully. I think the shirt is also really nice. This black line is also mimicking the stool in the shot. I think it's really beautiful. I don't prefer the expression in this one to the other one. I think it's mainly because the other one has such a nice squint to the eye. It feels intense. It feels like it has a purpose for the look and the pose. This one to me feels like we kind of caught like mid-glance or like mid-change of the face.
So I think we can both agree that our leaning shots are by far the best of the set.
I think that this is probably our best image of the set.
Why is that?
I think, well, styling-wise, the pose is really strong. I think that the lighting, obviously, you've nailed in this shot. I think everything's working harmoniously right here.
Well, because she's just draped in white and the background is white, I think shadows are going to add a little dynamic edge to this. And I think it's a very important aspect of this photograph because that's what is really truly bringing her out. That's what's really separating her from the background. I think it just overall adds a lot of interest to the photograph, and we all know that shadows create drama, not necessarily light.
What's your preference on the foot being cropped out? Like, is that something that bothers you, or from a photographer standpoint, are you okay with that?
I would say that that is one of the biggest critiques that I always get out of other photographers, is that I liked cropped, weird crops. I like strange crops, and I like crops that look like they're in a magazine. And if you go through and you flip through a Vogue or a Vanity Fair, or a W or a V, you know, a lot of times the dimensions aren't lined up with necessarily the aspect ratio of what the photographer captures. So there's a lot of strange crops. And so I like being tight as possible, but not getting the full frame. So a little toe crop, a little head crop doesn't really matter to me.
I like that you can still see the strap of the shoe and it's not as distracting as that.
Right. I think we found our final shot that we really love. So we're gonna take this shot, head over into post-processing and take it up a notch.
The initial vision for this shot was to have our model in a pure white room, but as you can see, the background in the set that Clay's assistants built didn't extend far enough, so we're going to have to fix that in post. So let's make that our first task in Photoshop. I've already gone ahead and done our Capture One process. It was very simple, the same thing that we've been doing on all of our images. The only things that I did were brought down the highlights a bit, increased the shadows, and added some contrast. To take care of this background extension, I'm going to start by using my marquee tool by hitting M on the keyboard, making a large selection of this white background. It doesn't really matter if we have more selected over there. I'm just catching a bit of her knee here, so we're going to move it over. I'm going to hit Command J to make a duplicate of that area. And then I'm going to hit Command T to open our transform tool, and I'm just going to stretch this out to the left. Hit enter, and we've already taken care of most of the issue. From here, I'm going to make another new layer. So Command Shift N. I'm going to name this background edge. Hit OK. Now to extend this line, I'm just going to duplicate it using our clone stamp tool. I'm going to hit S on the keyboard, increase my brush size. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can see a bit better. Move over to the area we're working on. Hold Option to make a sample of this edge. Now drag this over and line it up with the rest of the line. Let's click and drag this out and just paint in the new area. Let's back out and see how it looks. And already that's looking great. The next thing I need to do to make this look like a pure white room is remove this tape along the edges. So we're going to zoom in, take a look, and we can take care of this with the clone stamp tool again. I'm going to make my brush size a bit smaller using the square bracket keys. Make sure that we're using a harder edge on our brush. About 95%. Maybe zoom in a little bit more. And I actually want to make sure that our line is perfectly straight. So I'm going to make a selection of the area that I want to work in. That way, when I'm using the clone stamp tool, I can't go outside of that area, and it'll give us a perfectly clean edge. I'm going to use the lasso tool by hitting L on the keyboard. I'm going to select over here where I think the edge starts, make a large selection, and finish my line over here. When I release the pen from the tablet, Photoshop will fill in a line between my starting and ending point so it'll be perfectly straight. Now I can sample some good texture right about here and start painting this tape away. And since we made that selection, it'll give us a perfectly straight edge. I'm kind of seeing a difference in the lightness between the area that we just cloned and the original background. So to kind of blend that difference, I'm actually going to use our healing brush, make the brush size a bit larger. I'll sample up here, and I'll paint along the edge of that difference. And now you see right here that it's actually smoothed out that transition. I'm going to do the same thing for this difference right here. And now it's gone. Now to work on the opposite side, I need to invert that selection. So I'm going to hold Command Shift and hit I on the keyboard, and it's selected the exact opposite of our original selection. I'm going to go back to my clone stamp tool, make our brush a bit smaller, sample a good point right about here, and I'm going to start painting along that edge again. Now that we've finished up that line, we can remove our selection by hitting Command D on the keyboard. And now we need to take care of this area behind the chair. It'll be a little bit trickier because of the shadows, but we can still use the exact same technique that we used for this area. I'm going to zoom in a little bit again. Use our lasso tool by hitting L on the keyboard. Click right where we finished with the last line. Go around so we have a large area to work in, and finish off this selection where we think that the edge finishes. Let's let go of the keyboard and Photoshop will fill that line in so it's perfectly straight. And now we just need to deal with this part of the tape. We'll go back to our clone stamp tool. We'll make it a little bit softer. And now we just need to sample similar areas to clone away this tape. So I'm going to sample right here along the shadow and paint the rest of that tape away. When we start working close to this chair, we can't use a soft brush on our clone stamp, so we're just going to make it a little bit harder. Zoom in a bit. Make our brush a bit smaller, and start sampling and painting again. We'll do the same thing with this edge of the shadow as we did over here. We'll sample the edge of the shadow, bring it down so it lines up, just keep painting it out. We're starting to see a difference in the light between where we painted and the original background, but don't worry about that yet. We'll take care of this tape and then we'll smooth that edge out. This part is a little bit more difficult because we don't have anywhere to sample along this shadow, so we're going to try and imitate it by using a soft brush and sampling over here. We'll change our brush hardness. Sample in a good white space and slowly paint that out. That looks pretty good. Now let's take care of this difference in light here. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to use the same technique with the healing brush. We're going to go a little bit smaller. Make sure that our edge is a little bit softer. We'll sample in some good texture, and we'll start painting over that difference. There's a little bit over here still, so we'll do the same thing again. Sample some good texture, and smooth that difference out. I think that's looking pretty good, so let's do the other side now. We'll hit Command-Shift-I to invert our selection, and now we can work on everything else. We're going to start right on this corner here, go back to our clone stamp tool, sample a good white piece of the floor, start cloning that out. But now we've hit the edge of a shadow, so we need to kind of zoom in quite a bit so we can deal with this small area. Just sample along here to make this shadow edge a bit better. We're gonna make our brush even smaller now. Sample inside of the shadow and paint along this edge. We've got that little area done, but now we still have to do all of this. We're gonna make our brush size a bit bigger, clone inside of this shadow, start painting the tape away just like before. We're getting close to this chair, so let's zoom in, make our brush size a bit smaller, sample, start painting it out. Zoom back out, see how it looks. So far that's great. To take care of this area right here, I think we should just sample this section here and we'll bring it up. So I'm going to increase my brush size, hit Option, sample the good area, bring it over, and just start cloning it out again. Looking now, these shadows don't line up perfectly because we sampled from here. So we're going to fake it and push our shadow over a little bit. We'll just do that by manually painting it in by sampling the shadow right here. And let's start painting so that they meet up. That's looking pretty good. There's just a little bit of tape left over right here in this shadow. So let's try and clean that up a little bit. We will select some of the floor over here. Start slowly painting that away. We'll zoom in a little bit. And we need to take care of this harsh line here. So for this, I think we should use the healing brush. I'll hit J on my keyboard, shrink down our brush size. We'll sample right about here. Let's try healing that out. Since we're dealing with the edges of some shadows, the healing brush isn't quite working. It left a little bit of a weird transition here, so let's just clone that out with our clone brush. Shrink it down so it's easier to work with. Sample, kind of paint that out. It's looking pretty good. There's just a little bit of tape left here, so let's sample inside of this area and bring it over here. Awesome. Now that we're done with this area, we can remove our selection by hitting Command D on the keyboard. And you can see that we have a perfectly straight line across. I'm going to use the same methods to clean up this line and the vertical one. So I'm going to speed up this video while I work on it. So I just finished cleaning up all of the edges, and normally my next step would be to do my healing and dodge and burn. Since this room is pure white, it's really important to make it look flawless by removing all of the imperfections on the floor and on the walls. Since the room is white, it's very difficult to spot these imperfections. So I'm going to show you a quick trick using the curves adjustment layer so you can spot them a lot easier. I'm going to make a new curves adjustment and just bring it down quite a bit. Now all these imperfections on the floor are a lot easier to spot. We'll zoom in so we can go ahead and take care of them. I'm going to make a new layer to deal with these. So I'm going to hit on our background edge layer so that our new layer will be on top of that. Hit Command Shift N, and I'm going to name this Background Cleanup. Hit OK. Now we can just go through all of this area with our healing brush and clean this up as best as possible. I'm going to go ahead and clean up all the dirt on the floors and the walls, and then I'm going to go on to cleaning up the blemishes on our model and doing some basic dodge and burn. As soon as I'm done cleaning up the dirt on this floor, I'm going to delete our curves adjustment layer so the model looks normal again and I can continue working on her skin. I'm going to speed this up, and once I'm done, we'll slow it back down and show you a few more things. I've just finished up with all the minor work on this image with some healing and dodge and burn, but now I actually want to use dodge and burn to contour her face a little bit. This is going to be slightly similar to the global dodge and burn that we did on the image of Kurt a few lessons back. This image was shot with the intention of evoking a very strong masculine pose, so we're going to emphasize that by giving her a strong, sharp cheekbone. We're going to do that using the same layer we used for dodge and burn. I'm going to hit Command-Shift-N. We'll call this contour. Set the blend mode to soft light and fill it with soft light neutral color. Hit OK. Now we want to zoom in a little bit on her face. Make sure we have our brush selected. Increase our brush size. We'll check the hardness of our brush just to make sure that it's soft. Now in order to give her cheekbones a very sharp look, we're going to paint black below the cheekbone and white right on the edge of it. So let's go ahead and resize our brush to fit in this area here. And we'll just paint in a bit of black. And now let's switch to white by hitting X on our keyboard. Make our brush a bit smaller. Let's paint right above that black area. You want to follow the natural line of our cheekbone, so you're going to want to also bring it up closer to the bridge of the nose as well. We're going to do a little bit on the other side as well, just to balance it out. We'll switch to black, paint below that white line, and now I'll toggle the layer on and off to see the effect. I think that looks great. We've really sharpened up the features on her face. And now I want to move on to a quick color fix. We'll zoom out. To me, this floor looks a little bit cyan, so we're going to make a hue saturation adjustment layer. Click on the master drop down and go to cyans. We'll just check to make sure that this is where that color is. And that's definitely where there's a lot of cyan in there. So we're going to drag this saturation down to desaturate it and remove it from the photo. The final adjustment I want to make to this image is just to pull in her clothing a bit with some liquify. I'm going to make a clone stamp visible layer by holding Command-Option-Shift-E, and I can either hit Command-Shift-X or go to Filter and click on Liquify. We want to make our brush size a bit larger, right about there. Make sure that our pressure is pretty low. We just want to push in this area, as well as her pant right here. Just push that in a bit. The goal when doing this is to make the lines more straight and appealing to the eye. So we just want to push it in a little bit in a few more places. I think that looks great, so we're going to hit OK. That's all the adjustments we want to make on this image. So now let's save it out and send it over to Clay.
We're here back with another image from Jordan. This one is shot in the studio. It's looking really awesome. I really like the way this has come out. He's composited this background, he's applied his dodge and burn technique. It looks really good. But now we got to move into the color process. But we have to keep in mind that we have to keep this color very subtle because there is so much white and there's already so much contrast to this shot. We really don't need to do much here. We're going to apply a base layer. Hit Command-Option-Shift-E or Control-Alt-Shift-E. We're going to convert this to a smart object so that we can apply our camera raw filter. In this case, we're going to bring up the clarity. About 10 is where we need to be. Because there is so much contrast to this shot already, we don't really need to apply too much clarity. Next, let's move on to vibrance. I'm going to desaturate this image a little bit, not by much because it's already so desaturated. We're going to move that slider down to -10. Next up, we're going to create a curves adjustment layer and play with the color contrast. We want to keep this simple because there is so much white in this shot. Pull the reds down slightly, move on to the green channel, a little bit of magenta, little green in the highlights, not too much because again this is going to affect all of the white. Move on to the blue channel. Bring some warmth back in, a little bit of blue in the highlights to even it out. Perfect. Once we have our color contrast applied, again, we're going to move into color balance and work on the midtones. So I'm going to first start with a yellow and blue slider. I want to bring this all the way to the yellows, see what that looks like, and then bring it to the blues and see what that looks like. Just to find where you want to land, really like in somewhere in this range. Moving on to the green and magenta. Perfect. Next up is the red and cyan. About right there. So as we've done in previous lessons, I'm going to play with these sliders until I really find a nice balance of these midtones. Great. So I've landed on -25 on the blue and yellow, -15 on the green and magenta, and -10 on the red and cyan. I decided to keep this a little bit warm because I like that it feels hot. I like that it feels like it's outside and it's got this hard directional sunlight. Once we have our color applied, we're going to begin our sharpening process. Stamp those layers down, duplicate this layer, and group them together. I'm going to change the blending mode to overlay on the group and then select the first layer in the group and change that to vivid light. It's going to look crazy, but bear with me. We're going to invert this layer. We're going to go to Filter, Blur, Surface Blur. We're going to keep the radius at 10 pixels and the threshold at 8. I'm going to hit OK. Obviously, this looks a little over sharpened, so we're going to back this down to 50%. Now that we have our sharpening applied, we're going to stamp all these layers back down. Just like we've done in the last shots, we're going to apply some noise. This is going to reduce banding and give it a nice film look. The last step is we're going to make some final adjustments in Camera Raw, nothing too crazy. But I want to do that with a non-destructive workflow. So I create a new layer, convert it to a smart object, and so that we work off an adjustment layer rather than the layer itself. So now I'm going to play with these sliders right here just to make some final adjustments. So I've increased the exposure here just to bring out some brightness. I brought up some shadows a little bit and brought up the whites a little bit. We don't want to blow out any of this white in this frame. We want to keep it exposed. We want this to look and feel like it's in a bright room. Now that we've made our final adjustments with Camera Raw, I'm going to duplicate this layer and transform it so that we can elongate Alex's face. And we do that creating a new layer, hitting Command T, and dragging this up. Perfect. I think this is a great compelling image, especially for an editorial. So now we're going to save this out and move on.